and welcome to the Fighting Gentlemen. My name is Seth Farrell. I'm with the, well, right now I'm with the Palmetto Knights. They offered me the spot. Regularly I train with the Scholar St. George out of Charleston. Today I'll be talking about Victorian era self-defense. Now, the Victorian era, it's, mainly because, is during the reign of Queen Victoria. Mostly we'll be talking about towards the end of her reign. She was in her winter and Edward was well into his spring in the 1890s. There was a rise in the need for self-defense, mostly caused by the local newspapers, because in the 1860s they had what they called a garroting scare, where, ruffians would come along, someone would just come up out of nowhere and choke you while his buddies rifled through your pockets.
Quit rifling my pockets!
So it wasn't quite the garroting scare as, somebody coming up with a wire, which would have been even more terrifying. So, at the time, the main forms of self-defense were boxing or pugilism, and also single stick, which was mainly training for broadsword and military saber. Single stick used a much lighter stick, something more like this, and you always kept the ball in your hand, and you went through saber techniques. They had 4 guards hanging, outside, middle, and inside. They used the stick more like a blade. And with the inception of Bartitsu by Edward Barton Wright, he brought quite a few different specialists into London, including one of my favorite guys. He was a stick fighter. He studied Lacan, a man named Pierre Vini. And his preference, which is what I love about him, is he wanted a much heavier stick. He did not use it like a blade, he used it like a mace.
I like that guy.
He's bigger.
Instead of the sharp whipping motions, in single stick, the only real target you wanted to go for was the head, because most fights only ended with somebody drawing blood. So if you whack me across the body, you're probably not going to draw anything. You're just going to irritate the heck out of me and maybe lower my guard. This he used for, and he had 5 main areas of attack. Preen, outside of the knee. Sagum, the other side of the knee. It's in reference to myself as well. So I'm coming from my outside, or right, inside. There's also court, the 4th, which could be head, ribs, or inside of the wrist. Keep was other side of the head, ribs, or outside of the wrist. And then finally, top of the skull.
Big target.
All right. And speaking of targets, a little frame of reference I always like to use, and I grabbed one of these from the Palmetto Knights because it's the right size. When targeting with your cane, you want to aim right about here, or just a very small target, about a 3x5 card, sometimes a poker card, or an even more fun one, right here in the solar plexus. They referred to it as the mark, because in pugilism, you'd have your guard up, your right hand would be covering your mark, because the majority of knockouts came from, boom, right here. Knock you to the ground, it'll take you at least, 10 seconds to get up according to Marquis of Queensberry rules. The other one stayed out here. I'm going to set my mic down for a moment. And I kept him threatened. He has to go around my guard to get anywhere near me. So then I wait for my moment and sink in. The power always comes from that rear leg, whether I be southpaw, if I thrust with the jab, all my weight's coming from here. If I go in for this tight one, a hook, it's always come from that right toe. It's a good thing to remember, just because if I'm using a stick, I'm striking and thrusting, always coming off that rear to move forward. One thing I always like to go over when I'm talking about any kind of street defense is you have to learn ranges, depending on where you're going to use this. If he's too close, I'm not going to use a stick. So I like to, easy things to remember is, at this range, we're acquainted. I can see you, you can see me, I can kind of see what you're about. You're larger than average man and probably could...
Destroy some burgers.
Yeah? I was worried about my knees.
They do look tasty.
Oh, you got me. From here, we get a little bit closer, and we're outside of touching range. We're friendly. We can have a conversation. I get to know you a little bit better. And then we take one more step forward, and we're at what I call intimate. Because you have to be very careful on who you bring into intimate range. Because I can always just grab you like this and take you right out the room.
Didn't even buy me a drink.
And that is actually straight from Edward Barton writes Bartitsu. He did a few essays in Pearson's magazine. I want to say that was in one of his first, and that was just how to conduct an unruly gentleman out of a room. And you simply, act like you're hot. And you protect your face, and then rap.
If I start to fight back, if I'm trying,
I sink
I
lower,
hyperextend the elbow.
and all I had to do was lock onto my own wrist. He was one of the first ones to introduce a foreign concept to most English martial arts, and that would be jiu-jitsu, which he kind of rebranded as Bartitsu.
That's the English way.
Yeah, he came back home in 1898, and the second he was off the boat, he already established Bartitsu Limited without even writing anything or setting up a school. About a year later, we had the Bartitsu Club for arms and physical culture. That had everything from pugilism, fencing, Bartitsu or jiu-jitsu classes. Also, they had historical European martial arts even back then. They had historical fencing clubs. I don't want to trip. Sorry, I'm getting a little dry. And he brought in experts from Japan, all over the place. Pierre Vini, who, like I said, he's my favorite because he's an awful person. Also Swiss wrestlers, and just about any kind of, pugilist that you could find. The reason Bartitsu kind of fell out of favor was because about 3 years later, he greatly overestimated interest and also overpriced all of his membership fees. So he lost a whole lot of people to all the other jiu-jitsu classes that were sprouting up. One of note would be Edie Garrett, who trained the suffragettes. They had the bodyguard who protected, I want to say, it was Pankhurst. She was one of the founders of the Women's Social and Political Society or Union. She had a whole crowd of women that kept her safe. And all they had was jiu-jitsu Indian clubs hidden under their dresses, which, anytime somebody came near you and just come out with one of those, it's a mean surprise. Plus a whole lot of rocks and bricks in their bags. Now, there's a fun story about Edie Garrett's dojo, where one night, during the cat and mouse laws were in effect, every time a woman suffragette was released from prison due to illness, during hunger strikes, anything like that, the moment they were back into full health, the police would just go and round them right back up again. So finally it got to the point where there was street fights with the police. And so they got a bunch of these suffragettes were about to get rounded up, so they ran like heck all the way to Edie's place. She pulled up the tatami mats that they used for jiu-jitsu training, loosened all the floorboards, shoved everything underneath, and slammed it shut. Everybody get in your gis. And by the time the police were there, she's just, showing them how to wrestle. And it was, indecent for a man to, come in and interrupt that with, all these women doing physical things. Yeah. And now, I'm going to put down the mic just so, I can show you a little bit of cane work. And it is one of my favorite parts of this. I'm going to go with the heavy stick like Vini would want.
All right.
he preferred a forward guard and high. It keeps your head protected so that if you come in with an overhand strike, and he always said, get out of the way as well, and I can come around with another. So if he comes in, I'm in rear guard, same motion. Rear guard is also fun because I can leave my elbow out there and hope he tries to chicken wing me. But instead, either follow his wrist down or top of the head. Now, if anybody tried to thrust, it's one of the strangest parries that I've ever seen actually work, and that's a septime envelope. It's the
Septime envelope.
yeah. It's I'm not entirely sure whether I'm pronouncing it quite right. I always have my saber positions a little iffy, but you go from high guard, knock it here, and then I can grab hold of it, come across the back of his head. The regular septime would be here. Always start in high guard. I just stay out of the way on this one. I stay in friendly.
And if I keep going, he can also counter thrust over top towards my head.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, that target, the 3x5 space, if I get to the point where I can hit a playing card anytime I want, I can bop him right on the nose.
Low guard. I'm at the club at the knee.
Yeah, pull the knee out of the way and hit him in the head. I'd rather take a hit to the knee than go lights out. Now, the essence of especially jiu-jitsu and Barton's work was you want to overwhelm your opponent, knock him off balance before he has a chance to react, and put pressure on him any way you can, whether it be joint locks, throws, anything like that. So if I can draw him up into a high guard with this one, and just shove him over, then I can come up with him here. Yeah. Or, even more fun,
Oh, you had to go pull that.
if you got a hook.
We all know where this is going.
Bring him into a high guard, grab the knee, and charge through. Put him off balance, return to that forward guard. Just to show that again. I think for that high guard, just bring him up, come under his knee, and all I need to do is push him off balance, pull that leg out, especially if I can raise his leg this way. I try and stretch him every single way I can.
And also remember, at the time, I have nice rubberized, grippy soles on carpet. These are most likely going to be smooth-soled shoes
Something like this.
that's going to slip. So I'm going down very quickly.
You care to return the favor, just to show?
Yeah. All right, so we come at the high guard.
High guard, he wraps the knee, good. Push, and I go down even further.
Yeah, it's slipping. So it's very easy to do once you start separating the body that way.
And just about all of these things, you can relate one to another, whether it's, going up against a boxer with a cane. If he comes in, I can attack his hands, ribs, head.
It's going to be very uncomfortable for me very quick.
I can use my distance.
Oh, and show the strike once if I do close. If I do manage to close in,
Oh, from here?
yeah, he's now strikes become less relevant, but now he's
Yeah.
got that pommel that can go into
Yeah.
places.
It's not as good, so I might wrap into a bayonet grip and get some distance.
And then you can also incorporate that into the grappling.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. You gonna go there next?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So if we come in tight, I come in, I might catch him
I
with
might
a
catch
glove.
him here, wrap him underneath. Hard to do at fast speed, but once you practice it enough.
Yeah.
And go ahead, pick up one of the canes.
All right.
As you were saying before with the counter thrusting, if I make contact here and just serpentine underneath his arm, I might take a shot, but not as, I can always kick the leg out, go behind the knee to collapse it. Anything you can do to put your opponent off balance.
Pain guard wrap. the arm. If he strikes at my head, I go in that hang guard. If I let it slip and glance off, I can wrap.
Oh, yeah, that's always fun.
Come over the top. Knees. And a lot of this stuff is straight out of sword fighting as well. Both medieval, Renaissance.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites is, Fiore's plays, where you incorporate many of the same arm binds.
Even on a thrust, you can do a wrap.
Yeah, I come in here. Now, one of the main things that you need to remember, at the time, there was all these rules of etiquette involved as well. If you're in a, street defense situation and you're, along with somebody, I've always wondered why they always say, women should walk on the right. Until, I started doing more and more research, and if you wouldn't mind? No. Anyone?
He's ready. I'm blind, so.
Oh, that's fine. Just go and set your hand on my arm.
Okay.
Now, if he comes along and I'm guiding her down the street, I can step in front of her now and use my body to block it, and also move into a non-guard position. If she was on the other side,
And remember, most people are predominantly right-handed.
I'd have trouble getting everything loose, and he's already threatened her. It's much better to take the hit myself. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Pugilism.
Oh, yeah. Pugilism, you can go either left hand forward, right hand forward. I tend to be right hand dominant, so I keep this here. And if he's coming toward me, I'm going to try to be moving offline. Plus, if he's got that right hand forward, his mark is lined up right for this right hook. So all I have to do is get in and hit him here. If he's got orthodox, I need to go with my left hand, and I have to go right through his guard to get there. Yeah. So I keep mine out here, and if he tries to get in, I can keep him off, just like you would parry with the sword or the cane. Yeah, if I come in with the cane, he can keep himself, fairly protected with that orthodox stance. All he has to do is there. He can even wrap my hands.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes you're the one without a weapon,
Yeah.
and the assailant is. So
Yeah, I might just be some ruffian come rocking in.
Were any of you guys in the medieval street self-defense? Did that move look familiar right there? Same type of thing. Do that same blow. He's coming in. I gotta anticipate come in. Is that key lock where I can take and snap it this way? That'll really be rough.
And you'll see a lot of these martial arts, you'll see they'll be under different labelings, but the human body only bends and breaks in so many different ways. So, in Italian style, you'll see serpentines and ligadoras, and jiu-jitsu, you'll see binds and throws, and they all just have different names, but
Yeah,
they're
I
all
mean,
fairly the
if
same.
he throws another overhead blow at me, I might anticipate, and I can come up here and do that break of the arm, or if I'm trying to be a little bit nicer, grip here and go into my over-the-shoulder throw.
You do have to make sure that you do everything as quick as possible, because one of the main key points was you have to surprise me. If I'm waiting for it and he goes in for that, over the shoulder,
Right here.
and I get down here, I can turn him into a hobby horse.
Every single move has a counter, and every counter has a counter. It's just who can get there first, and who has the bigger knowledge
Yes.
and ability.
Now, let's say I'm using a much lighter stick and he's got his heavy. More likely than not, I'll adopt a two-hand position just to try and keep them offline. With this one, I'm not going to go straight at him because there's always a chance it might just wrap right over into my head. So
Another great technique for somebody adopting that over the head, I might pull it short and come in underneath with a thrust.
So it would be best to keep it low, keep only protected what you need to, and then just come in.
Same thing with a lower target. Either, deflector.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a harder deflect because with that two-handed grip, you can still come right in on the belly.
right.
So that's where these guards start coming in because I can use his power to go ahead and give me a little bit more of a swing. Swing right through. I'm out of range, but his head is in.
If somebody is going low, their head is usually in range if you have roughly equal weapons. If I'm trying to smash that knee, my head is in range before his leg is if he steps.
Yeah. The only way it really, really works well is if you go a whole lot lower with it.
Yeah.
And that's where you see, in Edward Barton writes articles, sometimes if you have your, bayonet grip, he'll just come right in here. And Pierre Vini was real big on just ramming right in there, either to disable your opponent or just to clear space. So, right here, or attack his hand. Because his club is much heavier, I might as well rack right up in here and tie him up. As I was saying, go get the lighter cane, just show a little bit of just to show the difference between cudgel play like this, Pierre Vini style, and single stick. Single stick, a lot of times, even had the one hand tied down, but the whole idea was to draw blood on somebody. And more often than not, it comes back and forth to this to see who can actually get in there faster. Yeah.
What was that? Yes, Mensur is very closely related to that style, where if you're not familiar with Mensur fencing, it was a kind of a fraternal sport macho thing where guys would stand on a space. Yeah,
Yeah.
it still is. And you'd have these, they kind of look like big sabers, and you could only try and cut when I can't move, and you go until somebody draws blood from the side of somebody's head. So you have these great photographs of all these buddies hanging out, and you got one guy sitting here like this. Like, hey, yeah, I'm in the club, great, yeah. Mensur fencing, yeah.
But that is one way that, the same techniques come in handy if I go up over his guard into that high pin. You can actually get to the back of his head. You just have to be much faster about it.
It is only 1:23.
Okay,
We
good,
got
good.
till
Still a bit more time.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Good. Sure.
We sell belts. Unless you wanted to do cane versus knife, is that what you want?
Yeah, more. Edward Barton didn't really show too much about carrying your own knife. More often than not, he was a big fan of. It's quoted in an article saying that it's very noble to learn these the art of the saber, the sword, the bayonet, but why not learn to use something that you always have in your hand? So, more often than not, either have it walking right-handed, left-handed. I like to keep it left-handed because I can parry with this hand, or I can switch over to that heavy cudgel play with the other.
But again, if I'm just coming by and I just,
It'll be a weaker block, just because I'm not very left-hand handy, but it works. Also, if somebody just tries to come in and grab hold of you,
oh, okay.
you can just bring this up and turn with it,
your hold-up situation.
Yeah. I get away from his knife, because that goes all the way over there, and I can stick him right inside of the
And
neck.
even if I try and come around, he's got control of the range.
So you want to do that from the other side?
Yeah.
Just so you'll see. Yeah. I'm just walking about. He comes in, gets into intimate range way before I want him to. So I snap this up here. I'll snap it a whole lot harder if he's really trying to get a hold of me. But there's a lot of nerves in the wrist. And just step offline, and I'm in my bayonet mode.
If I'm coming in for if I'm crazy, a crazy person trying to come in, just,
Yeah.
same thing.
You stop the wrist, grab him by the back of the head, take the knife away from him.
That's mine. Even slashing attacks, if I'm trying to get in, that those fingers are really exposed, that's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to rush in.
Start here, arrest the arm, and then free my weapon up. That is one good use of that the septime envelope that I found. If I come across here and get hold of them, my weapon is locked up. I'm going to get stuck in my armpits. I got to come all the way around here. If I use the septime envelope, I can come straight across the top. Much shorter motion.
I'm trying to slash at the neck. I'm trying to
Use my distance, or with this one, much harder to slow, either aim for hand or top of the head. Cane can also be used for if your opponent is just trying to grab hold of you. If he's a wrestler as well, yeah, this can come up, rack straight down. Sorry, did I get you?
No, you're fine.
Okay, good. I saw it come a little close to your neck.
Again, it's
Cane comes high, push straight down, get distance, and I can really step into it.
now if I'm let's pretend like I'm the good guy for once, and you're that, and he's got this stick, and I don't have anything. I've got to close and I've got to grapple. So as he's going to make his strikes, I've got to get in as quick as I can and control these hands and either get rid of his weapon and go into wrestling. We got these arm locks. I'm going to probably go for these knees, go into the wrestling from there. And that's where that jiu-jitsu and the
Iron
Greco-Roman style wrestling comes into play.
Yeah. The closer you get to him, the better you can get a hold of his. Hold on, step this way a bit. I don't want to knock you right into the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the closer you can join centers of gravity, the more you can control your opponent. So if I collapse this knee, I can push him even farther without really risking myself.
Yeah, and it's also displacing the hip is a big deal in that. If he's coming at me with a strike, if I'm just trying to throw him this way and use just upper body, he's strong enough that he's probably going to be able to fight back. I have to intercept his hip with mine in order to displace that right here, and I got to push that out, and that's what's going to take him back. And if there's one thing you don't do in Victorian era, is take a man's hat. Big,
That is insulting his wife.
I know, right? You can replace a wife. I'm the ruffian, he's the gentleman.
No, you only wanted me to go about 30 minutes.
So, yeah. Let's get some more plays with this. This technique of using the two hands on the stick might also occur if you get in close. If we're doing, if we're at normal range and we're going with our strikes here and we get in close, this happens a lot. We're both trying to close ground, we might get in close. So we might get into this type of situation. This is very common with medieval longsword. It's called half swording.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the techniques that you would use in medieval longsword in this position are the same types of things that you'd use here. So we're going to be trying to wind into positions to manipulate, to get on people's wrists and arms, to try and dislodge, throw. I can grip it. I can sandwich his knuckles here,
Oh, yeah. That's
right
always
there,
fun.
and twist that way. A lot of different things can happen from there. Come over the top with the half sword, two-handed grip. And he's going to try and wind it off to the side.
So I can get in here.
Come in there with the thrust. And if I'm good, I might be able to turn it this way, come into the elbow, into the shoulder. Maybe I can get this hook around the back of his neck to yank and pull this way. So a lot of the fighting would actually occur very close range.
And it's also very handy if you're just trying to close the gap very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, come in with these big baseball swings and then short it right into somebody's sternum.
Yeah. Feints, because these things are so light, you are able to feint. So I might come high and then crack at the shins and get out. And the thing I showed you earlier, if you're coming in high, I can pull up short and thrust up underneath.
And I'm short and high.
Lots of teeth, dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And also there's, speaking of feints, if I can get him into a high guard, because it's so light, I can whip right around and take him right in the teeth.
Or in the inside of the wrist as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought you were cutting to me.
Oh, I thought you were right.
So he cuts right here, and I might come into the inside of the wrist there.
And
or
the
even outside.
fun part of single stick is you really get to use your opponent's momentum once he starts really giving it to you.
And a lot of times what will happen is that you'll lure somebody into a pattern, especially the hanging guard, this type of thing. It's very easy to get locked into this, and then all of a sudden you pull something else out and throw in a leg strike. And you get the brain conditioned, like, okay, we're going, this is fast, and then you do something else, and that's where the fight can turn. Any questions?
Yeah, so I was just about to ask.
So women tended to not get into altercations, but they carried with them usually a parasol, a fan. Were they ever taught any moves like in a normal society?
It became very popular at the time, especially led by women like Edie Garrett and also Pierre Bini's wife. She was known to go into any part of town she wanted, armed with only a parasol, and anybody that went after her didn't do it again. In an article, she was described as exemplifies the fact that women with the right amount of training can hit just as hard and throw men to the ground just as well as any man can.
And the attributes of a parasol are roughly the same as any kind of cane with the hook, because you usually have the hook and then a point at one end. So that's thrusting, it's hooking, you can deflect a lot with that.
Were
So.
there any specialties made where there was actually like knives put into certain parts of it, or like knives tipped with the fans, things like that?
There were reinforced umbrellas, definitely. Just because if I try and go single stick or cudgel with him with just an umbrella, I'm going to ruin my umbrella. And more than likely it'll just be flopping about while he takes me in the head. So they would specially reinforce them. Women would carry, like I said, purses with rocks, bricks, anything like that. Brass knuckles were very popular. Miss?
I was going to say, I've read some articles from the 20th century where they considered hat pins
Yes.
menace because they had giant hat pins with big hats.
Oh yeah, any weapon you can
They were
find.
using them to defend themselves against men as well, especially with carriages and such.
Young lady?
I had a quick question. It's kind of like a chicken and an egg question. When it came to the canes and the sticks for gentlemen in that time period, would you say that the gentleman would bear a cane first and be out on the street with the woman in order to try to deter the violence, or did they create the art first and obviously have the utility of the cane to be applied to?
Canes became very popular after about 1700s when men stopped wearing swords. They would either carry an umbrella or a cane.
Just because they're
Yes, it was a lot of it was a fashion statement.
that's what I was wondering.
You would have your rough-hewn cane, for walking the dogs in, and you'd have a much nicer one for going to the opera or just something traditional to show where you were from. This one's Irish shillelagh from Shillelagh, Ireland.
And to piggyback on that, I'm just
Yes, ma'am.
wondering, because you see this in the movies, and I've always wondered how accurately they were historically portraying the customs of the day. But like even you see that in Mary Poppins, where the gentleman would also kind of fling the cane up as he is walking, and I was wondering, is that again custom
That
of
was
the
considered
day.
poor taste.
Or it's-
Yeah,
that's-
at the time you were supposed to be a bit more reserved than that. So if you're walking down the street, you were thought to be a bit of a dandy.
Well, and it's also kind of like, you're like, you know, this is almost a threat. If I'm just walking like this, I'm like, is he going to come at me with that thing? You know, so
And London was crowded.
unless you're trying to posture, which could be your intent as well, if you're strutting down, you're like, yeah, who am I going to club today? That might be exactly
We
what
might
you
do that in
do.
Liverpool.
Yeah. Sir?
I had a question.
You, sir.
Could you talk about like, what was the general places where the fight might happen, occur, breaks out, and what like the kind of ambient level of crime and violence was at that time period?
Fights occur anywhere. I mean, it's just like today. Anytime there's drinking involved,
Yeah.
and drinking and, you know, women and men who think they own said women, that fighting's just going to happen, just like today.
Yeah.
Crime level, you can probably answer that one.
I mean, there were, I read a whole lot of old newspaper articles, a lot from Pearson's, and one of the things that really stuck with me was thug knows no class. At one point, I think it was Pierre Vini that was up demonstrating, you know, different jiu-jitsu forms, and there was a handful of fellows that came in, top hats and ties, you know, out in their evening best. And one of them got upset because he was teaching Japanese, you know, styles instead of, you know, proper English. And so he tore off his jacket and waistcoat and had somebody hold his top hat despite his friends telling him not to. And he comes running in. Mr. Vini tossed him offside. He got back up and he performed what it's one of my favorites because you can throw a whole lot of body weight. And it's called the Fitzsimmons shift. Is where you bring the rear foot forward so I can extend.
Oh, so I'm just rushing in. I'm
Yeah.
full.
And you add that much more body weight because it's using my hips as leverage. My entire body's turning into this. And the fella, he was carried out by his friends.
Down in the front, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I have two like kind of technique questions.
Okay.
The first one came in when you were ducking down. You know, you're saying the head's in range when you go for the leg, but you crouch down really low
Yes, ma'am.
to hit the knee. Now, doesn't that mean he can just?
He can, but if you change where his target is, there's more of a chance of, especially if I come in as tight as I can, because he's got his fully extend, has much more range than I do. As he comes in, if I drop to one knee and use a full lunge, and you have to do this very quickly.
And again, even if I connect with the top of his head, I'm hitting him with like my arm, and that's not nearly as powerful as with the end of the staff. So even if I connect, if you want to do it again,
So,
I'm coming. That's not going to knock him out at all. But this thing coming into my ribs can snap.
and I use him to get back up and back out of range.
And then you were talking about garrote.
Yes, ma'am.
If someone came up behind you to choke you,
Yes.
how do you get them? Like,
Good
you can't really get them with the cane.
Oh, no. If he comes up behind me, I try and get there first, step behind him, and use my body weight to turn him clean over. But make sure you get that arm away from your throat. So, from here, I move his hips out of the center of gravity and simply push. Yeah. And
There's a number of things that can be done from there. That's a good.
if I can get up underneath him, I can do a full flying mare. But I don't want to do that.
Another good one.
See it.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
I'm going here. And I also usually will have my foot between his legs, because if I'm trying to drag him away, I'm going to probably lift my leg up into his back. But if he's good, he might be able to scoop my leg and pull it up.
Yeah. Especially if I have my cane handy, I can thread that right through and use that for leverage.
That photo's going to be somewhere. What is that coming out between it?
Man?
I have a question going back to the boxing,
Absolutely.
pugilism?
Yes.
Okay, so in modern boxing, the hands are up by the face to protect your face.
But the techniques you're using, your arms are extended. So what are the advantages, disadvantages?
Modern boxing, you're using the gloved hands. Pugilism, it's strictly bare knuckle. And one of the things that I don't want to do is offer him my elbow, because I mean, even if you just right hand slap him, yeah, he has all the leverage there. If I come in straight and he does the same motion, he's not going to put me off nearly as much.
The advent of the boxing glove is what brought the guard in really close. And even nowadays, if you watch the transition from boxing to like mixed martial arts where the gloves are smaller, or if you go back and watch some of the bare knuckle, you'll see a lot more people adopting what would usually be considered today more of a Muay Thai stance, where their hands are out here. And it's essentially the same type of thing. I want to intercept any coming blows, unless you're the type of person that has a very hard head. And I'm okay taking 1 or 2 blows coming in because I want to get inside and use my elbows, knees, or wrestle.
Yes.
So a lot of it just depends on who you are and if you're willing to mess this thing up on the way.
The technique of the kickboxing and fencing are actually one and the same. One using more,
Distance and timing.
Yes.
Sabat.
Yes, sir.
Sabat.
That's
How come in the British?
Sabat was introduced, especially most of what I researched was on Bartitsu. He only used a little bit of Sabat, mainly lower kicks to the leg, and also a full step kick to the torso.
Doesn't he have the knee stomp in there too, the front kick to the knee?
Oh,
Straight kick to the knee. The hyperextended knee, that's really nasty.
yeah.
To come in and stomp straight forward down at the knee. That's really nasty to do somebody though.
Yeah, I don't think he would disapprove.
I think we got this gentleman in the back of the ridge.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Historically, when did men stop, or people in general, stop carrying some kind of weapon?
Knives?
I still have it.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about carrying swords specifically
Carrying around
towards
with
the
a
end
lot
of the
all day.
1800s, right around in there. And again, it just depends on, a lot of it depends on region, because the rules in England are very different than the rules in Germany and France and other types of places.
Yeah, and especially even today, weapon laws are, quite a bit different over in England. Whereas over here, it's not uncommon for me to walk down the street, see men with knives on, in their pockets, for utility or, on their hips or anything like that, or even,
Fire.
carrying a gun.
Are there any two-handed techniques?
With,
Noticing you're all using one hand with the cane. Are there any two-handed techniques?
A lot of what he used was what I would call mainly bayonet thrusts.
Okay.
So
nothing like a katana grip or anything like that, like this.
I mean, if I have a cudgel, a big one like this, I'm basically, again, I can't really do sword techniques as far as swings go because there's no edge. So that type of cut isn't really going to do anything. It might bruise him some. What I might try, just blast right through his guard and crashing the arm into the leg, into the head. I might come on real hard with an overhead swing like that.
one specific
But it's a
technique
club.
that he used was, if you trade me,
Yes.
his is much faster than mine now. So I start up in here and step in here. Use my other hand, left helps right.
But yeah, the reason, because it has no edge, you have to kind of treat it like a club.
That's also why you see a lot of, especially in beanie style, you'll see more of the circular kind of loading motions. Yeah, instead of me just coming in and, knock, I tagged you, I have to come all the way around here and rock him.
Which means he's going to have to take a step back.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming in with my cut, that's where that momentum's going to come from, so he stays that ring. They got Captain America here
Oh,
first.
okay.
Other than the blackthorn cane that's kind of very iconic for Ireland.
Yes.
Yeah, in England and other places, were there any particular woods that were popular due to like lightness, strength, those kind of qualities that make for better?
Mostly ash. I would
Hickory?
say,
Is that-
well, hickory's more of an American.
Okay.
All right, this is hickory, and this is it's got a decent amount of weight to it.
I definitely know ash is one.
Yeah, ash was very popular. Also, if you're going out to the opera, exotic woods were very popular. You would have mahogany with a whalebone handle or any form of ivory.
A lot of the African hardwoods.
Those were more form than function, though.
Yes.
You mentioned it briefly a second ago, talking about using a lot of circular motion.
Yes, sir.
When you were developing the force for your attacks, were you trying to put more spin in it to increase the impact force, or were you just trying to actually muscle it?
It all depends on how much force he's giving me. If he comes in with a hard hit, I'm going to use his force to swing it about.
The impact of my blow basically chambers his counterattack. So, yeah, as it pops in, it swings around. You'll see that a lot with the hanging attack, or the hanging parry too. If he comes in strong at my head, I'm going to block here, and this impact is going to chamber that cut. So I'm not really muscling it through it, but I'm just allowing that momentum to carry through for a really fast counter.
So you guys, there's been a lot of focus on like head and torso. There was the one throw where he was behind you, and you took your cane behind his knee and threw.
Yes.
Are there other throws or strikes that target specifically in the leg or the lower body?
In the legs, yes. All I have to do is wrap my cane around his back knee and turn it. I can turn his whole body.
The problem with going with the lower targets, as we explained earlier, that it does expose the head.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Is it possible to use a cane to defend against a gun?
Depends on how close he is.
Right, if he comes up, let's pretend this is your little pepper box pistol, and he says, give me your money, I might be able to come over and do something like that. If it's anything out here, I'm done. There's just not enough room. I mean, I might be able to quickly pop this way, but I've really got to make sure as soon as I do that, I'm coming in and I'm closing for that gun. Or if it does happen to get out of his hand, it's going to be a scramble for the firearm. At that point, it's going to be wrestling.
Yeah, at that point, it's an arms race.
Arms race.
Keep your groaning outside.
The firearms would not be nearly as mechanically technical in the
Let me
technology.
show you my weapon.
Well, yes.
You don't want to take the chance to be wrong on that. You're not going to take that gamble.
At the time, you saw your fair share of derringers, pepper boxes, as he said. These were considered, more compact, and you could hide them in a suit jacket. If you're, looking more in the Gilded Age, which occurred simultaneously, you have your Westerners with, your Colts, your Webleys.
Yes.
Yeah, they get 6 shots before they're done.
Yeah, but in short, if I'm really close, I might have some options. Again, if it's a holdup and I can get my stick up in the air, I have a few more options. If he's closer, I might be able to come around here and do something there, but I've really got to make it quick because it's way too small, way too easy for him just to slip it under and pull a trigger. So, very difficult situation.
Or quite often, a lot of times I do train for, how often am I going to be walking down the street like this, looking for an attack? Who wants to play with me?
You go to work.
So, if he does come in with this, pepper box, as we're calling it, my cane will be down here. I can come straight up at it.
Or just straight into the hand as well.
Yeah, get his hand offline.
But again, he's got to follow that up really fast.
And sidestepping at the same time.
Oh,
to help
absolutely.
In case he pulls the trigger.
As Beanie says, don't be where the swing is hitting.
Yeah. In fact, that's good advice for just about all of them. If he comes in with an attack to the head, this is a bad place to be because if he powers through it, it still can come down and hit me in my head. Even if here is not great because he can come underneath, as he comes down, I definitely want to be stepping out to the side, get that at an angle outside so I can create a new line of attack.
Plus, as it changed, instead of it's not a block, it's a parry. Yeah,
It's a displacement. So, yes.
I said it
Oh,
Can you demonstrate if there is at all any differing ways people
Oh, yeah.
sizes and different types of cane?
I mean, my preferred method is, I do love my little blackthorn. It was a gift very recently from my fencing brothers back in Charleston. More often than not, I carry it simply in my left hand so that, in case I do need to switch over to that, beanie style, it comes straight up and the ball is out. I can also use it, for deflecting with the left side. If I'm constantly walking around with this in my hand, it's not as effective. I can whip and, thrust with it, but especially with a shillelagh, the business end is up top.
Yeah. So is there a defensive and an offensive way of walking? And is there different ways of walking, like back in Victorian times, depending on the era?
Well, as I said, especially if you're escorting anyone, whether it be a lady, person of respect, if you're the youngest man out of the group, you're going on the least protected side, was customary. So if I'm the low man on the totem pole, I'll be all the way to the left, so that in case somebody does pull a gun, I can get out. And the honorable thing would be to get in the way. And hopefully get the gun out of the way.
10 minutes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Before this guy, Edward Barton,
Yes, ma'am.
say around 1850s, 1860s, did that really change the stuff that you're showing?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said before that, all cane styles were based on a lot of master at arms, especially the Navy. In training for the saber, they would teach them single stick, which is, you'll have a rattan or an ash stick with a basket hilt on it. And also, Sinclair, he wrote extensively on training with the Scottish broadsword. And more often than not, the stick would be out here used as a blade instead of a cudgel. So I'd be trying to go, whipping motions. The only time I would attack his body is to try and lower his guard until I can come across his head. Because the only real target zone was, top of the head. You could, yeah. I mean, you could attack and, draw blood anywhere, really. I could bust his knuckles, but the real prize is getting him right inside of the eye.
Cracking the melon.
Yes. Yeah, I believe, especially in shillelagh fighting, my target has always been his left ear. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I was wondering more about the etiquette of just like the do during times and how it's changed over the years. Is there time to get a little decorum down before it ends?
It depends on what you mean specifically. You mean changes between the Victorian and Edwardian era, or
Between going out in the town in your evening jacket and going out in the daytime, if there's difference between that.
Not especially. You were always supposed to hold yourself with a certain amount of poise. Even at the time, they were saying a gentleman should hold himself with grace, be able to defend himself from ruffians, or defend a woman who's been insulted by said ruffians. But you were always supposed to be, on your best behavior. Otherwise, you were counted amongst them.
So you mentioned not swinging it around. Because
Oh yeah, it was just considered uncouth, tacky.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's, if you think about any kind of crowded sidewalk, as you're going up and down in escalators, and even here, you got people with all sorts of accoutrements, and and if somebody's just like, hey, I got the keyblade, hey! We don't have any of those guys in here. No, okay, I didn't offend anybody. But we've all seen that person, or they got some big thing on their shoulder, and they're walking around talking to everybody. You've got to be mindful of your space, the people around you, be courteous. It's really where we get a lot of what are supposed to be our modern mannerisms. And again, the other part of that is, and this extends back into what would be considered, a lot of the courtly graces of the medieval and the Renaissance era. A lot of that was not because people were so much more polite, it's that everybody was freaking armed. And everybody knew how to use their weapon. You don't want an accidental bonk with a stick to turn into 4 feet of steel being run through your body. I beg your pardon, sir, please excuse me. He's got a stick. I'm guessing he knows how to use it. He might have a knife, he might have a gun. I've got to respect that, There's not nearly the constant vigilism that we have these days, which has caused a lot of the downgrade and behavior. Everyone thinks that you can't touch me because you'll get in trouble.
Right.
Wasn't quite as popular back in the day. So the idea of being polite to people was not only because, you know, I just want to be a nice person. I'm trying to be a good Judeo-Christian, whatever religion happens to be in that region, but it's everybody's armed and everybody knows how to use it.
And also, certain people could afford to be rude if they had a whole bunch of people with them. If their father owned a large company, he could keep you out of prison for having yourself a Donnybrook in the streets. So.
Yeah.
And with the cane, for the most part, it was sword etiquette. You know, if I point with my cane, it's a threatening gesture. The same way in Disneyland, you're not allowed to point with one finger. It's yes.
Yeah. But again, if you're talking from like if you're writing a book or a script or something like that, you can use the counteract of that behavior to, you know, be a character. If you've got somebody who's like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? That's a threatening motion.
Yes.
That's not kind. That's not appropriate. But it might be right for that character. So.
Yes. You may.
I think you overlooked or didn't mention one thing so far, that wearing a weapon was also a matter of status, because often you were a noble when you did it, because commoners were sometimes not allowed to do this. So having a sword, even when it was no longer functional, it was a matter of status, and using it and showing your ability and willingness to shed blood for yourself, your honor, your family, your lady, it was a matter of being a noble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where the at the time period that this was mainly happening in, they carried the cane as a replacement for the sword, but it also became very dandified. It was no longer, so many guys were coming around. It was no longer a weapon. It was, you would get a marshal's baton or a riding crop or anything to hold in your hand to show, oh, I have money.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And that's why a lot of the swords, as we're getting out of the sword era, became more and more gaudy, because it basically became male jewelry and not functional.
Fencing clubs were, scaling more towards sport fencing. You would learn foil and epee and, saber. As opposed to, if you were in the military, it was pretty much the only place you would be able to find, proper saber training and a full cut and thrust weapon.
Just more of a comment, it's interesting seeing how even as carrying a cane or sword is no longer a thing that we do, it still carries over into modern military customs and courtesy.
Yes.
The senior person still walks on the right.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of those type of traditions.
It's the side of honor, and also as basically diametrically opposite of that. In more Norse traditions, women would walk on the left because that was the side of their heart. But also, traditionally, most Norsemen would either carry their swords or they'd have an axe on this hip, so they could get the left arm out. And yeah.
I was also wondering if there would be any problems for if you had the arm extended, like with the lady on the arm, and which arm you would choose because of that? Because, the helping of out of the carriage, the arm extended, and
Traditionally, like today, we hold hands with our sweetheart or whomever. At the time, it wasn't an interlacing the fingers, it wasn't cupping the hands. It was more just, she would lay her hand across yours, and you were escorting her. That way, if there was trouble, here, I would just step in front, use my hand to, put my, person of honor. Maybe even, tell her to get her umbrella ready.
By our powers combined. We've got about 1 more minute. Any more thoughts, questions?
Good job. Yes, sir.
After the gentleman defeated the ruffian,
yes.
What would be the procedure? Would they just kick him to the
at the time? What Edward Barton Wright would suggest would be a little bit further than citizen's arrest. He would talk about you could either hold a man there until the watch came, the policeman, but at the same time he would mention like you could break bones, you could hyperextend joints, using this jiu-jitsu style that he was amalgamifying. But for the most part, you would put him to the ground, and I would suggest running like hell.
And it also might
Minor
depend on
threats.
if you've got somebody with you. If
Yeah.
you've got a lady or a child present, you want to get them to safety.
Yes.
You know, you're trying to get away. All fighting is about attaining a goal, either getting somebody, getting something, saving something, protecting something, getting from one position to another. So if you're on your way home and you encounter something violent, you're going to continue on that goal and get back to where you were going to be, as opposed to, I'm just going to sit on this guy and keep poking him in the eye. Because he might get back up. You know, people don't stay unconscious nearly as long as the movies portray.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been knocked out at least once, and it only lasts a few seconds if that.
Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. If you're in any kind of situation like this, I would highly recommend walking in pairs. Recognize your distances between danger. If you can, run like hell. And if you can't, be prepared to defend yourself. And practice these techniques before you try to implement them in the street. Yeah, because there's nothing worse than him coming at me and I think I'm doing the right thing. And instead.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.